What is going on, everyone? We have a great segment for you. I have Adam Hawk. He is actually the exec producer of the Jim Rome Show. I don't know if anyone is into sports, but Jim Rome is the man, the legend. But we're here to talk about how Adam broke into the meat industry. What lessons has he learned from Jim Rome that we can learn as well? And of course, we're going to talk about his views on sports and media. So thanks for joining us, bro.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me down here, Ash. Appreciate it.
No worries. So tell us about your journey. How did you get into the job that you have right now?
Yeah, it started in 2009. I lived in Seattle. I was an avid sports talk radio listener. And I think you kind of grow up as either a guy that listens to music or a guy that listens to talk. And I always enjoyed listening to talk more than listening to music because the conversation was always changing. It felt like something I could participate in. When you're listening to music, you're kind of at, the mercy of the DJ playing whatever he's going to play.
Yeah.
And it's repetitive, and the sports talk conversation was always changing. So I found myself wanting to listen to what these guys had to say in Seattle. And when I went to college, I was able to call up the radio station, ask if they needed an intern. They did. I got on with a morning show up there in Seattle and did a 3-month internship over the course of the semester. Learned a lot, and that's how it started. And then when I moved from Seattle to Los Angeles, I did another internship at Jack FM, which is a music station. But I got some good advice along the way that if you can get your foot in the door of any radio station, doesn't matter what they're doing, or if you want to be doing what they're doing, or if they don't play the music you like, or they don't talk about the sports teams you like, just get in there and learn some stuff, and then you can take it from there. You would rather be inside the building than outside the building. So got over to Jack FM, started pressing buttons on the board and learning how to work some of the technical stuff. NBC Sports Radio launched a 24/7 network out of Culver City, very close to where I was living and working. And I went down there and said, look, I really want to do this. I've been working in radio for a couple of years now, was able to help launch that station with them. And it kind of parlayed from there. I got to work with some really cool talent there. Rodney Harrison, former New England Patriot, 2-time Super Bowl champ.
Legend.
Donovan McNabb was there. Learned a lot. Really hands-on experience. Total starter network where I did everything. Cut audio, produced shows, booked guests, did some segments with some hosts. And then, the thing about radio is everything is timing.
I know.
So the Beast 980 launched in LA as a local sports station to compete with 710 ESPN and 570 LA Sports. And it was another opportunity to get in on the ground floor somewhere. So I interviewed to produce the Fred Rogan show. Fred Rogan is a local news anchor here, and got that gig. That was my first real executive producing gig. I did that with Fred until they told us, hey, we're no longer a sports station. We're going to start playing Spanish music, which happens in this business. Stations sell, stations flip. And then I had to find a new job. Got one at Fox Sports Radio working for JT the Brick. And then that ultimately led me to Jim Rome. So it was a very linear move up from one place to another. Had wonderful experiences, ended everywhere on good terms, had a lot of great support. And for the last 3 years, I've been with Jim. So that is the really truncated but kind of long for an interview answer to my journey through radio.
I love that, and that's a great journey. So, a couple tidbits I wanted to just recap, if I may. One is you did the work, right?
Yes.
I mean, you hustled. I mean, you did the local station in Seattle, then you went all the way to LA, and I'm assuming you weren't like connected. Your uncle wasn't some producer or some exec or maybe Jim Rome's nephew or something. You weren't like any of those positions. You just came in there with that intent to get into the industry, right?
You're exactly right. There was no nepotism. There was no hookup. It was just, let me get in and let me see where it goes. Let me prove myself by doing the work, like you mentioned, by doing any job that I could possibly do. At Jack FM, I was board hopping from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m, playing songs from Tom Petty and Led Zeppelin, just sitting there trying to stay awake, chugging coffee, and just thinking, man, I hope one day this pays off. And it did, but you're exactly right. You have to do the work. And I would tell anybody who wants to break into this business that there really is no shortcut to it. You have to get in there. You have to apply yourself. You have to do really well at what you're doing at the time. And it's always good to think ahead about what's next, but you don't want to think so far ahead that you miss what you're doing right then and there. You want to be so good at what you're doing for the people you're doing it for that you implore them to continue to move up within the company. I didn't start off as the executive producer of the Jim Rome Show. I started off as a guy handing out stickers in 7-Eleven parking lots for Jack FM. And before that, an internship in Seattle where I was waking up solely to bring the newspaper to the radio host. So it was very humble beginnings, but I'll never forget them. And I learned a lot, and I love every experience that I've had. But today, anyone can do their own thing with just a little bit of technology. They can flip on their phone, they can send it to Apple Podcasts. In a couple of weeks, they can have a podcast. And all of a sudden you start thinking, hey, I'm a radio host now. When are the networks going to call me and give me my shot? And I respect anyone trying to do their own thing, but I would say that you're not going to get those opportunities unless you get yourself into a building with some infrastructure, with some people who have experience, who can see what you can do other than just having, a podcast on your phone that you can put on SoundCloud, because I would never discourage anyone from doing it. That's a great way to get reps, to get practice, to really feel if you have a knack for it. But everyone that wants to be a radio host or any kind of broadcast host really should try to get themselves into some kind of building and work behind the scenes so they have a feel for everything that goes into a broadcast, because everyone wants to be on air, but there's a lot of other jobs behind that you can learn from to make yourself a better air personality. Or maybe you realize, hey, I'm not an air talent. Maybe I'm a great producer. Maybe I'm a great segment producer. Maybe nobody finds and curates topics like me. Maybe I'm really good with people and I can put my host in great spots to be a great host. Maybe I can latch on to somebody who's already established in this business, who has a huge audience, who makes good money, and then I can also, in turn, serve his audience, make good money working for him. So I would tell everyone, don't narrow what you want to do just because you want to be the guy talking. Go into a building and work and see if you like the other stuff. And then while you're doing that, do your stuff on the side.
Okay. Let's talk about the future of media then. I know we're going to segue a little into that later, but maybe we can do it now because you talked about podcasting. We're in 2020. Obviously, the landscape has changed. I understand radio on a different level. I do a talk show, as you know, and it focuses on inspiring stories and entrepreneurs and innovators. But I've seen a shift in radio where I get asked by so many people. I'm like, "What do you do?" "Oh, I have a radio show." "Oh, where's your podcast?" I'm like, "No, I have a radio show." And then they have to be more specific. Where is it? Like, it's an FM radio show, and I feel like radio, while it's still the biggest medium from an audio standpoint to a certain degree, it doesn't have that same cachet in some ways as podcasting. And I have a podcast too, obviously, but I still love radio because of what you said, the short conversations. Like when I have a guest, I always say, listen, a podcast conversation is like you and I hang out on a couch, thrown out, or just talk about life for 1 to 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Radio, it's like, hey, 2-3 minute answers. We got 45 minutes. There'll be a break maybe because we got demand. We got advertisers. We want to get as many good answers as possible. Do you see that difference in radio and podcasting, or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Radio has a lot more structure to it. Podcasts have a looser form because when you are doing radio, there are a lot more things to consider. You have segments, you have commercial stop sets that you have to hit, you have sponsors that you have to oblige, you have a clock that you're working off of. This clock, if you're national, is a clock that every single affiliate is using. So you're bound to certain rules in radio, but rules make you better at what you're doing. They make your questions sharper, they make your conversations more potent, they make your content better. Yeah. So you are right that a lot of people are moving towards the podcast realm, and that's because anyone who wants to have a podcast can have a podcast, and I would never discourage that. What I would encourage podcasters to do, though, is to treat their podcast as seriously as you would treat a radio show.
Nice.
If you and a buddy want to sit around and jaw jack for an hour, you have to ask yourself the question, is there anybody outside of this room that's going to want to hear what we just did? Or are we just doing the show for ourselves? When you're doing a radio show, you know that you're doing it for a big audience because anyone that turns on the dial in their car has the opportunity to hear you. When you're podcasting, you have to think about, I want to do this show for somebody outside of this room. It's not for me and my buddy. It's not even for me. It's for everybody outside of this room. So add a little bit of structure. Listen to radio shows. Find out what they're doing. They're switching topics every couple minutes to keep the listener engaged. They're enunciating their words. Their sound quality is really good. I mean, you could be the best writer in the world, but if you can't spell or your handwriting sucks, it doesn't matter. So you might be the best host in the world, but your podcast sounds really bad because you don't have the technology to make it sound good. This is a sound medium. People are not going to listen to something, even if it's the best content in the world, if they can't hear it, if they can't understand it, if it sounds like you're doing it from a submarine or a bathroom. So put a lot of the pride into your podcast that you would put into a radio show. If you were parking your car at a parking lot and walking into a building the way that you do at UCI, treat your podcast the way you would treat your show at UCI. Treat your podcast the way you would treat it if you had a gig at a radio station. That's what I would tell every podcaster. Tighten it up, put some rules and guidelines in there, and your product will get so much better and more appealing to the listener. And then promote the hell out of it too.
Okay.
You got to do that.
How have you and your team been taking advantage of this new podcast, live stream, new media revolution, like over the last year or two? I mean, your show is obviously on radio and it's on satellite radio and all these other mediums, but how are you guys embracing it? And even YouTube, let's throw that in. Like, what do you think you guys are doing that's keeping you guys sharp in those arenas?
Sure. So there was a point in time where you had your time slot. Let's call it the Jim Rome time slot, 9 to noon. Your show lived from 9 to noon. The goal now with all of this technology in place is to make your show omnipresent. It no longer has to live between 9 to noon, which means your audience can be as big as you want it to be. Nice. You take your content from that show, you podcast it wherever you want to podcast it, Spotify, Apple, Google Play. You blast that podcast out. Now you bring in the on-demand audience. That on-demand audience can access your content whenever they want, the same way you can access a TV show whenever you want nowadays. Yep. You know, you're no longer running to your TV to catch something that starts at 7 p.m. You're catching it when you want to catch it. The same is true in radio with the technology afforded to us. So we've been able to put our content in different places to create a omnipresent feel, and then use mediums like Facebook and like Twitter to post our audio there. And now that we're simulcast on television, we're taking our best video clips from the day with Jim's best rants or his funniest moments or his best phone calls, and we're placing them in all those different arenas. So if you're a listener that can't catch the show, we try to make it so you can catch the show anywhere. And if you're someone that has no idea who we are, we're also serving you because we're putting ourselves in all these places where new listeners who are catching us on a digital platform have the ability to share it via retweeting, sharing a link, tagging someone on Facebook. So you do have to embrace these new technologies because it allows your show to live outside of your time window. And frankly, if you're not embracing those new technologies right now, you're going to lose because every other show you're competing against on terrestrial radio is putting their stuff out there on every platform that they possibly can. You're no longer just bound to a program director giving you time. You're bound to how much work you want into putting your content everywhere.
Okay. I love that. And I love that overview. And this is really, again, be aware what he's saying, and at least I'm translating it from this regard, for me at least, is, you know, do what you love. Of course, be really good at your craft, but also be aware of all these media platforms and have it everywhere on the right platforms because it's free and you got to go where the people are. And because we live in this 24/7 society where people are listening to content anytime, anywhere, you might be listening to this at 3 p.m. Someone might be hearing this at midnight. You got to have it everywhere, and it's easy to do. So I don't see why you shouldn't. I mean,
that's absolutely right. And to further that point, because we do have the ability now to do more things than just a 3-hour show, we do have an original content podcast as well. Yep. So instead of just taking repurposed material from our show and putting it on a podcast, we actually do a completely original one as well. So that creates this brand new side hustle and this brand new avenue for people to hear Jim talk to guests that normally wouldn't be on our radio show. For example, our most recent guest on our original content podcast was Danny DeVito.
Right.
Danny DeVito is doing a movie tour for Jumanji. This is a classic, legendary actor who, if we were to bring him on the radio show, it might not make sense because it's a sports radio show and he's promoting a movie. Sometimes that synergy can work, but most often that synergy is not going to work unless we have more than 10 minutes to talk.
Yeah.
So the podcast allows us these 30 to 45-minute conversations where we can talk to Danny DeVito about going to Lakers games, starring in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, working with The Rock versus working with Arnold Schwarzenegger, all these great things, a conversation you normally wouldn't hear Jim have. We now have that ability because podcasting exists. So we take advantage of that as well.
Let's talk about, speaking of the Jim Rome show, let's talk about Jim Rome. I mean, obviously, he's a legend. Obviously, I'm a fan of him, and anyone who's into sports is a fan of him. I want to just, a broad statement, obviously, but it's pretty safe to say that he's one of the top, sports hosts out there. What have you learned from him? I mean, what do you, obviously, you get to work with him every day, and it's been for over 3 years. You've had this role, like you mentioned. So, tell us, what have you learned from this legend that normally we don't get to see on camera?
Sure. Yeah, and it's a great question because I have learned more from Jim than I have from any host I've worked for. Okay. And that is no disrespect to any of the hosts I've worked for. I have great relationships with them. I consider them friends. They know the names of my kids. They've been to my weddings. I love them. I love the hosts I've worked for. Jim brings a different level of work ethic to his craft. And it's the work ethic he had from day one in Santa Barbara when he was trying to get the show off the ground, to San Diego, and eventually to syndication. He has that work ethic today. Our show starts at 9 in the morning. Every day he shows up before 6 in the morning for it. So he's putting 3 hours of prep into his show, doing the show, and then staying afterwards to work on it as well. A lot of hosts you'll see will roll in to a show maybe an hour beforehand, really rely heavily on the producer to get them the content that they're going to ultimately use on the show, and then rely on radio shortcuts, which is leaning on a lot of callers, even if the callers aren't that good.
I've done that, I've
right?
That. Yeah.
Resetting the same topics over and over and over again, recycling certain takes and rants that they had from the days previous, playing a lot of play-by-play sound for a game that everyone has already seen when they should be talking about how they felt about the game rather than playing highlights from it. That's not Jim. Jim is... he's amazing with that. He leads by example. He's why we're all in there early in the morning and why we all stay late after the show. And then on top of that, he's a consummate professional. And I think to call someone a professional is the highest compliment you can give someone. If you're a professional at your craft, I mean, that's like you're a black belt at the dojo, like you're the man. You're a professional. Everything about you is professional. He takes the pronunciation of everybody's name extremely seriously. He wants to get that right every single time. He wants everything he's saying to be factual and buttoned up. He doesn't say things for the sake of saying things. Good. In that business, we call it a hot take, where you would just say something because you want to get a reaction. Again, that's another shortcut where you say something you don't believe you get a reaction.
A great example, sorry to interrupt, but a great example is, do you remember when, there's this whole fiasco about Michael Jordan saying, Steph Curry isn't Hall of Fame worthy?
Yep.
But in reality, it was just, no, he's just not allowed to say certain things because of the NBA rules. Whether you love him or hate it, it's the rule. But they totally construed it that he's not Hall of Fame worthy, and then created that whole fiasco.
Sure, yeah, where you can take it out of context and then get some content and stretch content. Yeah, I do remember that very vividly. And again, that's where a lesser prepared host would lean on some very easy content to fill a segment. And that's another thing. There's a difference between doing a segment and filling a segment. Doing a segment is you're going in prepared and you can't wait to do it because you know you've got good content, you want to deliver it, and your audience is going to get a lot out of it. Filling a segment is just, man, I really hope I get from the start of this to the end of it. Grab me some calls, grab me some emails, let me just get through this, and you start not caring about your audience. Your audience should be viewed as customers, and you would treat customers at a restaurant or at a retail store like they're your lifeblood, because they are. They exchange their money for your services. That money pays for you to live. The radio audience is no different. If the radio audience isn't there, the ratings aren't there. If the ratings aren't there, sponsors aren't there. If the sponsors aren't there, your paycheck's not there. So in a roundabout way, your audience is paying you for your services. And as soon as you start to cheat them on those services, or you don't give them a reason to tune in and they go away, and the local program directors who are running your local affiliate start to notice a dip in the ratings, well, they have to do their job and pull your show.
Wow.
You start losing affiliates and you start losing listeners, then you're not having the same discussions with your managers and your bosses when contract time comes around, So treat the audience as your customers, because that's exactly what they are. And as soon as you start cheating on them, you know it. You know when you're being lazy. You know when you're kicking your feet up. That's when they start to go away. Jim never cheats the audience. He's got work ethic like I've never seen before. This is a guy who has every reason to take it easy for being in the business for 30 years and being as good as he is at it. But he doesn't. And when you work for someone that never takes their foot off the gas, you have no choice but to get on that damn train and keep up with the speed that he sets, with the pace that he sets, or you get left behind. So I've never learned more, and I've never been a better employee than I am right now, and I owe that all to Jim.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Speaking of interviews or segments, what are some of the most memorable segments in these last few years, and why? Like where you really saw Jim going to that level where you're like, okay, I get he has a great work ethic. I get that he's the consumer professional, as they call it, but you're like, you know what? This was a crazy interview, and Jim was able to handle like a boss.
Yeah, I so badly wish that I could come up with an example off the top of my head, because that would make a story resonate with the audience. But I will tell you this, there's not a single segment where I don't realize like I'm sitting on the other side of the glass from an icon.
Yep.
One of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time, a guy that's credited with starting the business in the industry.
For sure.
You know, he's made a lot of careers. And there are just times where you're watching him and you're like, I can't believe this stuff just comes to your head. I can't believe you're as good at doing this on the fly as you are, because radio is a tightrope act. You know, you're just out there doing a show, talking to yourself. That's another thing. He's a standalone host. A lot of people have co-hosts. A lot of people have sidekicks. A lot of people bring their producers on a lot. He's just out there monologuing, riffing, ranting, giving takes, and never flubbing, never losing his train of thought. It's always just, it's so professional, and you know, being a fan, listening to it, it just sounds different, you know.
It does.
It's different. And I really wish I could point to a specific example, but it's basically every segment. You're just like, okay, I'm working for the GOAT, you know.
So I'll give you a deeper confession besides loving sports and loving his show, but I'll tell you one thing that he's taught me that I've used in radio right now. So when I first started, I've had my show for I'm going to hit my 4th year this year in the fall. And there are times when I don't have guests, or there are times when I want to talk about some topics, and I will go on air and I will start talking straight for 45 to 50 minutes. And I will find that easier than having an interview, even with the preset interview questions, even if like we had a preset meeting like what you and I had before. I will enjoy getting what I call that stream of conscious flow energy on a topic. And I've been asked several times, like, did you go to acting school? Did you, my mindful side, are you doing some crazy, did you do meditation before? I'm like, and the answer I tell is the truth. I learned this from Jim Rome.
Wow.
I learned that gift from Jim Rome. And I'm obviously a very young student compared to him. But I can say that my what I call that improv flow, which is what you mentioned, where we rip on a topic when it's sort of an inspired thought in your head, and you get, as you conversate, you get to say things that are just keep going and going. I learned it from his show. And the other thing I learned that he does very well is I could have a conversation with you right now, and we could talk about baseball. And all of a sudden, my main intention is like, so what sport you like? Baseball. Okay, what's your favorite athlete? You be like, Ken Griffey Jr. Without you even being prepared, I will get a channeled thought in my head that says, okay, let's talk about Ken Griffey Jr. more. But it's done in a way that doesn't catch you off guard. See, It's very easy for someone to just ask a question on the fly, but to ask a question on the fly that's related to the original topic, I feel that's another skill set that Jim has mastered.
Absolutely. And like you said, when you aren't, pulling the rug out from the person you're talking to and you're setting them up to continue the conversation, that's also a skill. And in improv, there's the rule, never say no.
Yep.
You want to keep your partner going. So yes, Jim, and that's really cool that you learned it from him and that you do it yourself. When you have the ability to keep a conversation going rather than snuffing it out by just like you said, randomly firing questions or not knowing where to go with something. It's really cool that you took that away from him. Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me at all. We have a lot of people who learn a lot from this show. And that would make sense that when you listen to a show for a long time, you can pick up some of these tendencies. Every athlete learned originally from like watching their favorite guys on TV.
Kobe learned from Jordan.
Right.
Just watch tapes. You see that Showtime doc, The Muse? Kobe
No,
did?
I haven't seen it yet.
So Kobe, it's amazing. So Kobe talks about his own journey. It's a first person story where he's narrating his journey, and they show him as a kid, just his uncle from America, because he was living in Italy at the time because his dad was playing for the European Basketball League. He just watched Jordan tapes and all the greats, and that's why many people say when you see Kobe, you're like, is he like the second coming of Jordan to a certain degree? It's because he literally just watched those tapes.
Right.
And for me, I literally watch or hear his interviews, and that helped me so much. And I still do. I still try to stay sharp. But Rome is like my MBA in communications.
That's really cool. That's awesome to hear. And like a lot of people will learn a second language by watching movies in that language, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people learn how to swing a golf club by watching Tiger Woods. So to emulate someone who's very good at it is very savvy by you. And it's also something that I've heard from numerous people who will drive around, listen to a show a lot, and think, man, I want to do that, and I want to take what I've learned from him and apply it to what I'm doing myself. So really cool that you
Thank
do
you.
that. Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So before we end this episode, we got to talk about the obvious thing, sports.
Sure.
You love golf. What's your take on golf? Like, who are the players that excite you right now?
There's no more exciting player in the entire world than Tiger Woods. And the fact that he is back at the age of 43, coming off of 5 different back surgeries, coming off of obviously one of the most crazy scandals in American sports history.
Yeah.
A scandal that could have easily just driven him out of the public eye forever. I mean, that's a really tough thing to come back from. I'm not going to sit here and give him any kind of sympathy. Everything that happened to him, from the injuries to the fallout with his marriage, was 100% self-inflicted.
Okay.
Everything he's ever done to his body and to his marriage and family life, he did to himself. He swung out of his ass for 20 years and hurt his back. I mean, that's going to happen. And he went around on his wife with a bunch of different women.
Yeah.
So he did it to himself. But that doesn't change the fact that where most everyone else would have just gone away forever, especially considering how bad the injuries were and how embarrassing the scandal was, the fact that he is back, he won the Masters, he won his 82nd tournament to tie Sam Snead, he looks every bit the best golfer on the planet again, especially after what he did at the President's Cup. It's just remarkable. And Tiger Woods is why I got into golf, why I watch golf, why I play golf. It's one of the reasons why, my mom and I are so tight, because we bond over Tiger Woods, which is really weird. Dads will teach their kids sports. My dad wanted nothing to do with golf. He's like, this sport's lame. My mom loved it. She took me golfing. We watched Tiger together. So, yeah, besides Tiger, Brooks Koepka is very exciting. Yep. He's probably the face of golf right now, in the sense that, he backs up a lot of trash talk with some really good game, and he's getting everyone to speed up and play faster because he's calling everyone out on pace of play. He's not succumbing to the normal golf guy media, super boring dude. He's just like, this is me. I drink Michelob Ultras. I hit the ball a mile. I only show up and play majors. I find golf kind of boring, and I'm not going to change for anyone. Also, everyone else play faster. And that's pretty cool because he backs it up. So I'm into Tiger. I'm into Brooks. And shout out to Pat Perez too, who's love that guy. Yep. So that would be my golf take for right now.
Okay.
Absolutely.
In baseball, I love the fact that you and I share a bond about Griffey. Did you ever see Griffey Jr. play as a kid? Did you ever go to Mariner Stadium? Is that what they call it?
At the time when Griffey played, it was the Kingdome, which was an absolute dump in downtown Seattle. It was just a pile of concrete with a dome over it, because in Seattle you had to have a covered field because it rains 300 days out of the year. AstroTurf, guys getting just mangled by the cement. And yeah, I saw Griffey play. I saw him play a bunch. That was, one thing I always demanded of my parents. We live 25 minutes away. Ken Griffey Jr. plays. I'm 13 years old. Please, let's go to all these games. So fell in love with Griffey, fell in love with baseball. I think every kid fell in love with Griffey in the 90s, right?
For sure.
Even if you didn't live in Seattle.
Yeah.
You were playing the video games, you were wearing the Nikes. Every kid, right-handed or left-handed, went to the backyard and did the Griffey swing.
Yeah.
And it's still the purest swing to this day. It's the best-looking swing. And, yeah, I loved watching him. When he left for the Reds, it was devastating.
It was.
I would bet you he regrets that.
Of course he does. His career tanked. Not tanked, but
no, I mean, you're not wrong. He had as bad of a second half of his career as he did a good first half, that you forget how great he really was. He was so good on the Mariners in the late 80s and 90s that he made 2 all-decade teams, Rookie of the Year, MVP.
Yeah.
He just, like Mike Trout, he never had any postseason success. Mike Trout has not had any postseason success. These are some of the best baseball players in the world not getting to the biggest stages. Problem is, baseball is such a regional game now.
It is now. It's all about your local team.
It's about your local team. You do not have conversations on a large scale about teams that aren't playing right in your backyard. And even when they are playing in your backyard, you're like, there's 162 of those. I'll pay attention when I need to.
One of the biggest tragedies, and I'm not, by the way, disclaimer, I'm not hating on Padre fans, but I'm going to say something about your stadium. So if I'm a Giants guy, okay, anytime the Dodgers and Giants play, whether it's in LA or in SF, there's a mob of people. That's an old school rivalry, right?
Yep.
I went to Padres Stadium once. I mean, and it's beautiful. It's like you see the ocean, and it's like beautiful weather. There's something beautiful about San Diego.
Right.
And they beat the Dodgers, and the crowd wasn't even excited, and they weren't even like, I was like, some teams, man, they gotta like revamp their fans. That's all I'm saying. So Padre fans, I'm looking for you guys to step up your game.
Yeah, well, hey, it's a tough town to be a sports fan. One, the Chargers are gone.
Yeah.
The Clippers left for LA.
Yeah.
The Padres have been horrible since Tony Gwynn left.
I know.
I mean, they had Jake Peavy and Adrian Gonzalez and Chris Young, and they were decent for a few years, but never got out of the first round of the playoffs. So I think this is a town that has just been conditioned to losing, and they so happen to have one of the most beautiful ballparks, like you mentioned. It's right in the Gaslamp District downtown. They took an old building and built it right in the park with that Western Metal Supply building. They've got that statue of TG. They've got the Little League field. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Right?
The problem is, if you don't live right downtown, you got to fight some of the worst traffic in the nation to go watch one of the worst baseball teams in the nation. And it's not like it's cheap to go to baseball games and then take your family and eat there. So really, you're asking yourself, hey, on a Tuesday night, do I want to go spend, $300 to take the family down to watch a horrible product in an empty stadium? So I would actually put the onus more on the team than the fans.
Yeah.
If a restaurant sucked, and it sucked over and over and over again, you would just stop going to the restaurant, wouldn't you? No matter how good the vibe was, you'd be like, man, this food sucks.
Yeah.
It's a nice restaurant, the food sucks. So you'd stop going.
Man, it's funny. You bring up the Griffey swing. So as a kid, I used to play. You ever play home run derby with your friends?
Of course.
So you know what swing I used to do, and it actually works. It takes Juan Gonzalez one.
Oh,
remember that one, that high range?
I really wish I knew Juan Gonzalez was going to come up on the show today. Yeah, I can't believe you just you brought up Juan. That's a name that doesn't get mentioned enough because unfortunately his blood was coursing with steroids his entire career. Yeah, but number 19, right fielder for the Texas Rangers, Juan Gonzalez, stud. And yeah, you're right. He had that crazy swing. Last game at the Kingdom before they demolished it to build Safeco Field, Juan Gonzalez hit a ball to deep center field. I was at the game. Griffey went right up the wall, pulled back a home run. Just one of the most amazing memories, and what a way to send out the Kingdom. I would tell anyone listening right now, go onto YouTube, Google Ken Griffey Jr. robbed Juan Gonzalez. It is one of the sickest plays ever. Do it. It's great, especially if you like both those guys. It's an amazing play.
Okay. Let's talk about one last sport, basketball. So we talked offline about the Clippers, and again, I'm not trying to offend any of my Laker fans. Nothing against LeBron. He's obviously a GOAT, and, man, that team is crushing it. But I had said this to some of my friends that prior to the season started that Clippers are going to go all the way. Why? Well, because the Warriors are on rehab right now. So I'm a Warriors fan. I'm not even a Clippers fan, but I acknowledge when there's great talent. But I knew with, with some of their team players being injured. They just needed to take a break. They're on vacay. I mean, they've won, so many championships in the last 5 years. Out of the last 5 years, it's like everyone deserves a little vacay, right?
Sure.
But I felt that this is the time for the Clippers to go all the way. But I feel it's because of one reason. I feel like they have this grit, this hunger. And I feel that's a trait. You talked about your grit and your hunger to succeed in the radio industry, media industry. I'm sorry. I feel that the same thing could be applied to why the Clippers are going to go all the way. Besides the talent, obviously Kawhi is legendary. But what do you think?
I definitely agree with you that there's a lot of grit with that team, and I think it comes from Doc Rivers. He is a very gritty coach who has always gotten the best out of the teams that he's coached. He did it in Boston with the Big Three. He got a lot out of Blake Griffin and Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan, and a lot of people would argue that team should have probably won a championship at some point. But that team hated each other, and Doc Rivers somehow kept it together. I mean, that's not a secret. Blake Griffin and Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan hated each other. I think DeAndre and Blake were cool, but for Doc to be able to keep that together, then bring his son in and not have it completely collapse on him is a testament to him, and he is a gritty guy. And now you've got players like Patrick Beverley, the type of guy who you hate him if he's not on your team, but you absolutely love him if he is, and he sets the tone on the defense. Lou Williams, 6th man of the year. Kawhi is a tremendous, tremendous basketball player who never takes any possessions off. I mean, LeBron, we all love him. Everyone knows that he took defensive possessions off when he was carrying the Cavaliers on his back because he had to. You can't play 82 games and then play defense every single possession. So the Clippers do have the mental makeup for it. What's really interesting is we haven't even seen the best this team has to offer because they're one of the teams that's, subscribed to load management. So often nights you'll see one or two of their best players like Kawhi or Paul George on the bench resting or rehabbing an injury that doesn't exist just so they can be ready to go for the NBA Finals. And that is the goal, to win a championship.
Of course.
Nothing else matters. The Toronto Raptors only saw Kawhi Leonard play 60 regular season games last year. He took a quarter of the season off rehabbing fake injuries, but then when he got to the finals, no one had fresher legs than him, and he got past the Warriors, and he brought Canada their first title ever in the NBA, which is insane. And there's not a single Raptors fan who is upset that he didn't play those 20 regular season games. So the Clippers are employing that exact same strategy. Makes it kind of hard to tune in every night because you don't know what you're going to see or who you're going to see. But come playoff time, he'll be on the court every single night. He'll be fresh. And your Warriors being down this year has opened up the entire rest of the league. And the Clippers better win this year.
They better.
They have to.
They have to.
This is as good as it gets in terms of the opportunity to finish it. Now,
who do you think they're going to play?
In the Western Conference Finals or the Finals?
Finals. What's your prediction?
I mean, I would be an idiot if I didn't say that the Bucks aren't going to be there. Giannis is an MVP candidate.
Freak.
Yeah, he's insane. The Bucks are leading the East right now by, I think, 8 games, which is crazy to have that kind of lead before the All-Star break. Not over their division, over the conference. Like, that's crazy. As good as the Lakers are, the Bucks are 3 games better. But I also do believe that basketball in the regular season is totally different than basketball in the postseason. I think these guys can take it to a different level when they have to, and I think the kind of basketball you see in May and June,
it's gonna be amazing.
It's gonna be great.
I have no life in May and June. Like every night, I'm just gonna be glued to a TV. I'll be like calling you up, let's go watch it here, or come to my house. I'll go to your house. Like I have no life. I forget social events. I'm just watching the playoffs and the finals.
Yeah, it's great.
It is the best freaking sports to watch for the playoffs and finals because you get like. It's like you get like 60-minute or 4 quarters of like just pure adrenaline rush. It's crazy.
Absolutely, and that's kind of a problem that the NBA has though is that their postseason now is so much better and more meaningful than their regular season.
Yeah,
that they've kind of cannibalized their own product because you and I aren't going to race home tonight to watch the NBA.
No.
We're going to race home in May and June. We're going to set our alarms to make sure we're on the road to beat this crazy Southern California traffic to watch it. But you've seen it. The ratings are tanking this year because load management, guys aren't playing every night. Nothing really matters till you get to the postseason. There's 30 teams in the league. 16 make it to the playoffs. That's over half.
Wow.
So you might as well just fast forward to the playoffs, right? I mean, the regular season doesn't do anything for anybody anymore. The NBA has become a product that's more interesting off the court than on the court. These guys are great on Instagram. They're very visible because they play so close to the crowd. They're not wearing hats. They're not wearing helmets. You can see them. You feel connected to them. They show up in commercials. They're on TV shows. They're normally dating celebrities. So the NBA's got a lot going for it. It's just the regular season is not a compelling product.
NBA's done a good job of the image. They even had the Kaepernick type of drama. And if they've had players who might have those types of intentions or styles, they're able to hold it back. And I feel the NBA is a very positive. It's very positive when you look at a lot of sports, and I think partly it's because what you said. There's a realness with the players.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and that the commissioner Adam Silver has turned it into a players' league.
Yeah.
Where he has enabled them to be who they are and who they want to be. You know, like in the NFL, you can't even wear the headphones you want to wear because they got a certain deal with a certain company. So it's definitely a players' league. The NBA definitely took its fair share, and rightfully so, of a PR beating with what was happening over in China and how they originally sided with China instead of their own Daryl Morey, because China has a lot of money that they pay for rights to air NBA games, and no matter how progressive the NBA is, it's still a capitalistic company in a capitalistic country, and money rules everything. And so the NBA tried to distance themselves from that the best as possible. And you'll notice no one talks about it anymore. The media doesn't ask questions about it. The players aren't going out of their way to talk about it. Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich haven't said anything.
Yeah.
Daryl Morey's not being interviewed anymore. It's almost like everyone got together behind the scenes and said, shut up about this. Let's play our season. Let's stop talking about it. And let's get the world off of our back so we can get back to just printing a lot of cash and playing basketball. Because we had it really good until Daryl Morey brought up something very serious. And now no one likes this. No one likes answering questions they don't want to answer anymore. So let's stop talking about it.
It's ironic that we're doing this interview on the day that our president is signing the China trade deal, or at least the first phase, according to various news sources. So how ironic that we're talking about this. I just found that ironic.
Sure. And I've got zero expertise in that realm, and so I will just politely defer to you on all of that. I have no idea about any of that.
Yeah, no, it's fairly interesting. So just type in China trade deal. There's a signing supposedly today, or there's a discussion. But yeah, anyways, I digress. But listen, I really appreciate you being on this show. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge about mentorship and where how people can break into the media industry. As someone who literally has looked up to your current boss or your collaborator,
sure.
I've used a lot of what he has done for me to become a better communicator, both with presentations and both with radio, which is my passion. I just want to thank you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you giving me the forum. I can be very long-winded with this stuff because I'm very passionate about it, but I thought your questions were awesome. And I hope that your listeners and your viewers can take just one thing from this. Whenever I listen to someone talk about something I'm interested in, you don't need to retain all of it. Just take one thing and apply it. No need to write out a list of 10 resolutions on January 1st. Just pick one thing you want to be better at and just attack that,
That's funny. But, well, everyone, we are signing off. But thank you, everyone, for joining the live. And this will be broadcasted on my radio show next week. I'll send some info on that. Thank you all. Have a great day.